Diversion started 5 years ago when we realized the 50th anniversary of one of the most important films in all of film history is going to come up. And it's Paramount's responsibility to do the best we can by this title. How could we make it better? Well, first is technology and display technology, right? We have 4K, we have a high dynamic range, so we have those tools. But also, we knew that there could possibly be more material that was original that we could find if we looked hard enough to include in our restoration to improve it. It was important to have somebody really oversee every detail of this restoration, and that's when the amazing Laura Thornburg came in.
It was really wonderful to be asked back to oversee the team that was working on this. I mean, and Zoetrope was a wonderful collaborator as well. We've known James for a long time.
Not only, I think, did he provide sort of the proxy for Mr. Coppola at certain circumstances, but he also, physically, he and his team did a lot of the cleanup of this. So instead of just sending it out to anybody,
right,
they did the actual, because after you scan, you do a basic cleanup of the scans. You take out little scratches and dirt and things like that.
Or big scratches. Or giant stains, all of which were present in spades.
So that was really nice to have that sort of hands-on care.
Try just bringing the blue channel down a little bit. Ooh, look at that green.
Paramount has always said, we're looking forward to the 50th anniversary, and Francis was making sure that he wanted to participate. And it just seemed right that we could lend a hand and Francis could be very involved and being part of that collaboration during that restoration. Having the ability to do it in-house allows him to say, okay, this is where I would want to spend time on in the picture, or this is what I would fix, or I would leave that alone. And Paramount allowed us to kind of participate and be with them at the table doing this restoration alongside with them. So it was a very good collaboration.
I got an email from Francis saying, hey, can you come to the theater and watch Godfather 3 with me? And I was like, yeah, sure, of course. Went to the theater and he started talking about, what if can you see what happens when we put that scene somewhere else? And then he was like, here, see if you can do this. I'm gonna go and, next time we meet, see if you can do this, 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 and this. So I was like, okay, I guess I'm making changes to Godfather 3 now. I think at that point, that's when we, approached Paramount and say, this is what we're working on. And they were supportive of whatever he wanted to do. So they were behind Coda from the beginning. And, when it came time to do this new version of Godfather 3, Paramount said, you guys can, do the restoration and take the reins.
So that added to the whole project. Great, we're going to restore 1 and 2, but 3 was going to be a little different. It was a nice compliment.
With regards to the original negative, prior to it being put into the cold vault, which essentially arrested its deterioration, portions of it had started to, break down. It's a 50-year-old element. So I'm glad that we were able to scan it at the point at which we did. For the restoration in 2007, there was a CRI, and that's a color reversal internegative. We had of the entire feature, and that was used as a secondary element to fill in places where the negative was missing or compromised. Now, more of our hero element for a secondary element was the separations, because the technology to scan and recombine them was better. We also found a pretty reasonable amount of additional original negative for opticals and things like that, where we had not had that in 2007. Part of this project, in addition to restoring the movies, was getting a better handle on the inventory and making that documentation tight. And that is where Jeffrey and Chuck did such extraordinary work. And they really did kind of heroic work in finding things that seemed unfindable up until the bitter end.
Doing the legwork, trying to understand actually what we're looking for as we're going through the process, going between our preservation team and the folks at Zoetrope, on a regular basis. This is all at the height of COVID. We were shut down like the week of the start of this. I mean, it was really unprecedented in that sense, because I set up a makeshift film bench at my house from a 6-foot folding table and a couple C-clamps and rewinds. I have a pickup truck. I would take truckloads of cartons out of the archive, which is unheard of. Yeah, and quite literally take them home. In those cartons were those priceless, one of a kind, don't exist anywhere else in the world pieces that we had to locate.
Well, we had the original cut and assembled negative, so that's the original negative that went through the camera. Then from that they created what we call YCM masters, yellow, cyan, and magenta, which is essentially a black and white dupe of the original camera negative with various filters, a yellow, a cyan, and magenta. So that actually protects color fading. We also have what we call trims, outs, and dailies. It's basically everything that it was not used in the final cut in the film. And among that inventory were things like the sources used for opticals. So that would have been anytime you have a fade or a dissolve or a title over picture. Most of the trims, outs, dailies, etc. were put into cartons and put into essentially deep storage.
It's amazing to me that, in 2007, Robert Harris did an incredible amount of archaeology and went through it. But here we are, 13 years, 14 years later, and they're still finding stuff, and they're finding things that were archived under a different film.
The restoration process, we started with 3 first, and backed our way into them 1 and 2. And so 3 wasn't simply only finding pieces to replace for things like opticals, but there's a new cut of the film, Coda, and so there was a replacing of all the opticals and also finding alternates and such for an actual new cut of the film. My first task is to try to find the corresponding production paperwork. Fortunately for the Godfather films, for Godfather 1, we have the original handwritten line script, which is an amazing artifact unto itself.
The line script, they've meticulously written down the setups, where the camera is. They mark what scenes from the script covered, and they have a little description about lenses, about whether it's a good or bad take.
You'll have circled takes. So those are the takes that the director has indicated are the ones that he would like the editors to work with. So that's a good indicator for me when I'm digging through the inventory. I've narrowed down my search already based on this 50-year-old paperwork.
It was a real cooperative effort between our team in terms of pulling what was needed, sending it to our preservation team, who are having this stuff scanned, and then sending it to James up in American Zoetrope so that it could be cut in.
So they would send us drives, and James and I split reels. James do reels 1, 2, 8, 9, 10, and I would do 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, stuff like that. Once a reel is finished, and a reel is generally made up of all different kinds of sources, not just negative, but like you discussed, the YCM, CRI, dupe negative, all that stuff. We would send the hard drive to MPI, and Jan would ingest it into his system, and then they would work on the color.
Initially, when I heard that it could be a project and we were going to do it, I kind of, oh no, we got to go through all this exploration again to find elements. But the more I saw images from our new scanner and got to play with them a little bit on the Baselight, I started to become very enthusiastic as to what we could actually produce this time around compared to last time around. The fact that we're using high dynamic range, 4,000 nits, a color palette that's much more expanded than what we had originally used, is producing some wonderful images and still keeping them in the flavor that Gordon wanted them to be. He didn't want anything on the film that was what he wanted and no more. So exposures were, in general, under a bit compared to a normal look.
Gordon famously shot the negative so that it could only be correctly printed in a certain manner. And that was his way of sort of maintaining a very tight control over the look of it. So the studio couldn't mess with it, so the labs couldn't get things wrong, etc., etc. I mean, and I've seen an interview where he says the way to print it is 4 points yellow, 1 point red. And that's the notorious, as I would call it, brassy look of the movie, that sort of rich golden with a little bit of red to it. And the 4 points yellow, 1 point red thing was something I sort of kept repeating to Jan and to the folks working on it.
HDR format has 3 main things going for it. First of all, resolution. So 4K resolution, so that's 4 times 2K. Second is dynamic range, the amount of dark to light steps you can have within it. There's more bit depth to them, some wonderful detail in there, some wonderful gradations that you never could see before. The wedding scenes outside, beginning of Godfather 1, before, in the original version, any kind of highlight coming off of the wedding dress, hats, had no detail in them. They were always blown out, so they looked like a kind of a doopy photograph. It worked well in standard def and beginning of high definition. But now with HDR and with a TV set that you can buy and purchase that can reveal this amount of detail, that we can now see that there actually is a little bit of detail in that dress. We can still maintain the brightness level and give you that same feel, that same effect, but now there's some detail in it. It's not just a white blob. It actually pulls you into the image. You actually feel like you're more part of what's going on there. And then the third part is the color dynamic range. Good Lord, the color palette we have to work with. We can actually make yellows that look yellow, not green. We can actually make reds look red instead of orange. Gives you the ability to get a good, natural, intended look. I think the version that we've created is the best version possible. And I don't think that we'll ever be able to get any more out of the film than what we got this time around. Because of that, I think the version we have is just terrific, and it just looks wonderful. Has the same flavor, same tones, but gosh, it's such a pleasure to look at.
It's an honor, and it's a privilege, but it's also a huge responsibility. This is, the Godfather. It's on your shoulders. It's so important. So that's why we started 5 years ago.
I mean, the exciting thing for me is, of course, thinking of the future when this is released and how it is shared with, a worldwide audience of people who love this movie. And it's really exciting to think about the people who might be seeing what we've worked on for the very first time.
As the archivist, I feel that we work within certain constraints, that we don't want to change the artist's vision, and we always have their vision in mind to what we're doing. I feel that over the last restorations that we have done, and with the technology where it is that we're at a very good point in time. And I feel that the home entertainment side of things has really come to a point where I don't know where we're going to go beyond 4K.
There's no better restoration project that I could think of. I don't know where to go from here. All anyone ever cared about on this project was making it as good as possible. I think what we're going to be releasing is the best that it could absolutely be done. I mean, we've worked so many rounds of QC on this film and so many rounds of color and just everybody worked so hard. It's nothing but satisfying to me to be able to release this because I know it's as good as it can be.